Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us.
Always fun to be here.
So today we're tackling conflict resolution. Always a hot topic, right? And we're doing it with a really unique book.
A really unique approach, I'd say.
It's called Conflict Resolution, A Life in Letters by Jorge Amado Yunes.
I love this book.
Me too.
Yeah.
Instead of just, the usual advice and all that.
Like do's and don'ts.
Yeah, exactly. Yunes, he shares his wisdom through personal letters.
Yeah, his own letters from his life.
Yeah, and stories from his life, which is
Fantastic.
it's so much more relatable.
Absolutely. It really makes it feel like you're sitting down with him having a cup of coffee.
Yeah, just like chatting with a friend
It's sad.
who's been through it all.
Yeah, and what's so
Hard
cool
to
is...
say that.
Okay, you
Yeah.
go ahead. Okay, so what makes it so fascinating is it's not just about those big conflicts, right?
The legal battles, the boardroom showdowns.
Yeah, it's not just about those. It's like he shows us how to apply conflict resolution to everyday life. Exactly. He shows us that it's a way of life, not just a set of techniques.
I love that.
So much.
And his personal journey really brings this home.
Yes.
Especially.
I know what you're going to say.
Oh, do you?
The story about his father.
Yes. Such a powerful story. It really highlights that seeking reconciliation.
It's not about winning?
Exactly. It's not about winning those arguments.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about understanding
Right.
and finding common ground, even in those small, everyday moments.
Okay, so let's get practical. How do we actually make conflict resolution part of our daily lives?
Well, Yunes, he's all about careful communication.
Makes sense coming from a guy who wrote a whole book, right?
Right. But he really digs deep into the power of words, the power of really choosing your words carefully. He contrasts argumentation with empathy.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. Argumentation, it's often about winning, but empathy.
That's about connection.
Yes. And he reminds us that both logic and emotional connection are key.
You can't have one without the other, can you? Exactly. Like, you can have the most logical argument in the world,
Yeah.
but if you haven't connected with the other person,
You've lost already.
you've already lost the battle, yeah.
It's so true. It happens to me all the time. I'm like so focused on winning
Winning the argument,
that I forget about actually connecting.
and then you end up feeling even more disconnected.
Exactly. So how do we do this whole empathy thing? I mean, is there like a trick to it?
Well, there's this great story in the book.
Oh, I love his story.
They're so good. It's about these two sisters arguing over an orange.
Okay, classic.
Classic sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
So their dad, trying to be fair, just cuts the orange in half.
Oh, no.
Right. But it turns out...
They wanted different parts.
Exactly. One sister wanted the peel for making marmalade.
And the other one wanted the juice.
The juice. If he had just taken a moment,
To add.
to understand what they really wanted.
You could have given them both what they wanted.
Exactly.
That is such a good analogy because I feel like we do that all the time.
We jump into problem-solving mode.
Yeah. Without really understanding the other person's perspective or even like their needs and wants.
Their motivations.
Yeah.
Why they want the orange in the first place.
Okay, speaking of understanding different perspectives,
This is a good one.
Yunes tells this story about a victim in a mediation.
Oh my gosh, yes. And this victim remained silent
Silent the whole time.
the entire time, didn't say a word.
Wow.
And it really made him think about the importance of making sure,
Everyone feels heard.
yes, even those who might not be as vocal
Those who are maybe a little bit shyer.
or struggling to express themselves
Right, because their perspective
is just as valid.
Yeah.
And sometimes those unspoken feelings.
can be the key.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now this leads us to a big question.
The age-old debate.
Yeah. Emotion versus rationality
Mm.
in conflict resolution.
How do we balance those two?
Right.
Are we supposed to be like these super logical robots?
Or just let our emotions run wild.
Right. So Yunes uses this idea of thinkers versus feelers.
Okay, I like that.
And he tells this great story
Another good story.
about a passionate football player who clashes with this really rational strategist.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
And what he argues is that both types, both thinkers and feelers,
Are necessary.
are absolutely crucial.
Okay, so it's not about suppressing our emotions
No,
or trying to be like Mr. Spock.
totally. It's about finding that balance.
That sweet spot.
Yes, between passion and reason.
Okay, so we need that fire, that passion.
To fuel our conviction.
Right, but also that calm, clear thinking.
To help us see the big picture.
Big picture, okay. Now this next part is a little ironic, considering how much we've been talking.
Okay, what's that?
Yunes talks about the power of silence.
Ah, yes. The power of silence. It might seem ironic.
Coming from the author of a book about communication.
Right. But Yunes admits to being a compulsive talker himself.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a little better.
Right. We've all been there.
Yeah.
But he realized that silence,
Can be powerful.
especially in the middle of a conflict,
Right. It gives you time to think.
reflect, understand,
Yeah.
and come up with more thoughtful solutions. He even finds comfort in Psalm 94.19.
Where the psalmist talks about finding clarity in silence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. It's like hitting the pause button on all the noise.
Yeah, and all the chaos.
And just allowing yourself to be present with your thoughts and your feelings.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Okay, another point Yunes brings up, and I think this is so interesting,
Tell me more.
is the role of nostalgia in conflict.
Oh, yes. Nostalgia. That longing for the good old days.
Yeah, and he argues that it can actually hinder our ability to address present conflicts.
It can hold us back.
Yeah. So how does he explain that?
Well, he connects it to Psalm 90, which urges us to focus on the present and the future.
It's like we're so busy looking in the rearview mirror,
That we miss what's right in front of us.
we miss the road ahead. Yeah. I like that.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
It is.
And then he uses this really cool metaphor to explain negotiation.
Oh, I love a good metaphor.
Okay, are you ready for this? He compares it to a road trip.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I'm buckled up. Let's go.
He's not talking about those little arguments in the back seat.
Like, are we there yet?
Exactly, or who gets to control the music.
Yeah.
He's talking about the bigger picture. You know how on any road trip,
There are bumps along the way.
bumps, detours.
Maybe a flat tire.
Right. But you gotta keep moving forward.
Keep your eyes on the destination.
Exactly. And not get stuck in those little grievances.
Okay, so it's about being flexible
Adaptable.
and remembering that to illustrate the allure of virtual reality.
Ah, I see. The temptation to escape.
Yeah, escape into these perfect worlds.
These curated experiences.
Yeah, and it's like we're forgetting the beauty of
Real human connection.
real life, yeah, with all its messiness and imperfections.
Right. He even quotes King Solomon, who said, "The fight to satisfy our hunger with things of this world is as old as the human race."
It's that constant chase for something more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
When real fulfillment is often found
These
when,
little things.
yeah, those everyday moments.
Protections we make.
Yeah. And this actually leads perfectly into his discussion about technology.
Okay, how so?
Because he talks about how, technology can be amazing,
It connects us in so many ways.
but can also complicate our relationships.
Right. It's a double-edged sword.
Totally.
Mm.
And he tells this sweet story about his nephews who live overseas
Yeah.
and how physical affection
Hug, a handshake.
really strengthened their bond.
It's a good reminder that sometimes we just need to, disconnect from the digital world.
And have a real face-to-face conversation.
Now, especially when we're trying to resolve a conflict.
Right, because sometimes emojis just don't cut it.
Exactly.
Okay, now Yunes, he throws a real curveball here.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What is it?
He talks about the role of self-esteem in conflict.
Okay, interesting. What's his take on it?
And he says, get this, nowhere in the Bible is there a command to love ourselves.
Whoa. That's going to make some people think.
Yeah, it kind of goes against everything we hear these days.
The whole self-love movement.
Right.
But he suggests that focusing too much on ourselves can actually lead to more conflict.
It's like he's saying maybe true peace comes from something bigger than ourselves.
Connecting to something beyond our own ego.
Yeah, something more transcendent.
And he shares his personal experience of finding peace through his relationship with God.
Right. Finding that connection to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And then he brings us back down to earth, in a way.
Okay, how so?
He talks about a very specific area of conflict that so many of us can relate to.
Okay, I'm listening.
Discipline.
Oh, especially in a parenting context.
Yes. It's such a tough topic. He starts with a funny, kind of heartbreaking story.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
You do.
The chess pawn and the toilet.
Yes, that one. It perfectly captures those complicated emotions.
The guilt, the frustration.
Yeah, that come with discipline, especially as a child.
Yeah. And then he connects it to a biblical perspective.
He brings in passages from Ephesians and Proverbs.
I love how he weaves together those ancient teachings with his personal experiences.
Right. He shows us that these principles are timeless.
They're still relevant today.
Absolutely. And he emphasizes that discipline, when done right, is an act of love
It's about guiding a child.
toward their full potential.
Yeah, while also respecting their individuality.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it?
It is. Okay, so now, shifting gears a bit, Yunes gets into some really tough stuff.
What do you mean?
He talks about helping children cope with anger and the desire for revenge.
Especially when a parent is battling a serious illness.
Yeah, that's heavy stuff. I can't even imagine.
It's heartbreaking, and he draws on his own experience of losing his father to cancer.
And what kind of advice does he give?
He talks about the importance of recognizing and managing those feelings of anger.
Finding healthy outlets.
Yes. He emphasizes the power of confession
Prayer.
and seeking support from others.
So it's about creating a safe space for those difficult emotions.
And finding those sources of strength and support that can help you through the dark times.
Okay, now get this. Yunes introduces this concept he calls God's simultaneousness.
God's simultaneousness. Okay, now you've got me curious.
It's this idea that God is at work in multiple places and situations at the same time.
It's like he's everywhere at once.
Exactly. And it connects to the story of Noah's Ark.
Oh, wow. How does he do that?
He talks about how God orchestrated this impossible feat.
Bringing all those animals together.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
And the point he's making is that if God can handle something as complex as Noah's Ark,
he can certainly handle the challenges we're facing.
he's got this. He's working behind the scenes.
Even when we can't see it.
And understanding this can bring us peace, especially during those times of conflict.
It's about surrendering control and trusting in a bigger plan.
A plan that we might not fully understand,
But we can trust that it's unfolding.
in its own time.
Okay, so now Yunes leads us into this incredibly powerful reflection
Oh, this one gets me every time.
on the stoning of Stephen in Acts 7.
Such a brutal, heartbreaking story.
I know. It's tough to read.
And Yunes focuses on this incredible act of forgiveness.
Forgiveness in the face of...
Extreme violence.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
Stephen forgives his killers
While they're stoning him to death.
as they're killing him.
And Yunes presents this as a powerful lesson in conflict resolution.
It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, we can choose love over hate.
Even when every fiber of our being is screaming for revenge.
It's a challenging concept.
But also incredibly inspiring.
And to bring this to life, Yunes shares a story about visiting a friend who had just lost his wife to cancer.
I remember that story. It's so beautiful.
And the way this family found solace in their faith in the midst of such grief.
It's a testament to the power of faith to carry us through those dark times.
And to help us find meaning, even in the face of loss and suffering.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, now Yunes, he reminds us of something we often forget.
In our busy go-go-go world.
The importance of rest.
Ah, rest. Such a simple word.
But so profound.
Right. In today's world,
It's like a radical concept.
it is, and Yunes points out that even Jesus
In the days leading up to his crucifixion,
took time to rest.
he took time to recharge,
He's giving us permission to slow down,
to be still.
to disconnect from the noise of the world.
I love that. It's a permission slip we all need.
We do.
And to really drive this point home, Yunes shares this story that's both terrifying and ultimately inspiring.
You're talking about...
Being robbed at gunpoint.
Oh, wow. Yes, that story.
I can't imagine
He describes that feeling of shock, of vulnerability.
the fear.
And what's remarkable is his daughter's response. She prayed for the robbers.
For their salvation.
Yes. In that moment of fear and trauma.
She chose forgiveness.
She chose love.
I get chills every time I hear that story.
It's such a powerful testament to the transformative power of Yunes' message.
It's about finding God's goodness even in the darkest moments.
And choosing love over fear, even when it feels impossible.
And you know what else he does in this section?
What's that?
He shares this fictional short story.
Oh, yeah. Other people's time.
Yeah. It's a little different.
It is. It's a change of pace.
But it so beautifully illustrates his principles.
Of empathy, presence, deep listening.
It's about putting your own agenda aside.
And really tuning in to the other person.
You know, as you were talking about all this,
Yeah.
I realized I was doing that.
You were really present.
Yeah, just absorbing everything you were saying.
It's amazing how a simple shift in focus can change the whole dynamic.
Of a conversation.
Of any interaction, really.
It's like putting down your phone
Turning off the TV.
and giving someone your undivided attention.
Which, let's be honest, is a rare gift these days.
It is.
And Yunes, at the end of this story, he asks this really thought-provoking question.
Oh, what's that?
He asks, why is it so hard for us to understand that what we give in life, including our time, our attention, is more important than what we receive?
Wow, that's deep.
It is.
It makes you think about your priorities.
What are we chasing?
Yeah, are we so focused on getting what we want
Achieving our goals.
that we forget to give back?
To give our time, our attention, our love to others.
It's a great question to ponder.
It is.
Are we truly present with the people in our lives?
Are we giving more than we're taking?
Hmm. Something to think about.
For sure. And there's one more concept that Yunes introduces that I think we should explore.
Oh, really? What's that?
The idea of planned emotional outbursts.
Planned outbursts. Now, wait a minute. Didn't we talk about the power of silence?
We did, but Yoon suggests that sometimes a deliberate and controlled display of emotion can be a powerful tool in a negotiation.
So it's not about letting your emotions run wild.
Not at all. It's about using them strategically.
Okay. I'm intrigued. This sounds a little dangerous, but also kind of brilliant.
It is. It's about knowing when to hold back.
And when to let loose.
Exactly. But we'll dive into that more in part 2 of our deep dive.
Ooh, can't wait. I'm already hooked. This is good stuff.
Okay, so planned emotional outbursts. How can that possibly help resolve a conflict?
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Like, wouldn't that just escalate things?
You'd think so. But Yoon shares this story. It's about a woman struggling with a low credit score. She was so frustrated with the bank, they weren't budging. So she decided to stage a controlled outburst.
Ooh, I'm nervous already.
She expressed her anger and frustration,
Oh, this is making me sweat.
but in a deliberate way. And guess what?
What happened? Did they, like, call security or something?
No, they actually listened. Her outburst, it got their attention, and they agreed to raise her credit score.
Wow, okay. I would never have the guts to do that.
Now, Yoons does say this approach, it's not for everyone or every situation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it shows you sometimes you got to shake things up a bit.
You gotta get creative.
Exactly. To get people to really listen.
So it's like knowing when to use that tool.
Right. It's about discernment.
Okay, so how do we develop that discernment?
Well, Yoons, he emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to conflict resolution.
Makes sense.
Each conflict is unique, right?
Yeah.
With its own history, its own complexities. So,
Like a fingerprint.
exactly. Trying to apply a cookie-cutter approach, it rarely works.
It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet with a hammer.
You need the right tool for the job.
Sometimes you gotta improvise.
Exactly. And speaking of understanding the nuances of conflict, Yoons points out the different stages of conflict.
Okay, like what?
He uses a funny analogy.
Oh, I love his analogies. Lay it on me.
He compares it to the stages of a pimple.
Okay, a pimple. Now that's an analogy I wasn't expecting.
Right, so just like a pimple.
It goes through those phases.
Exactly, from that little bump.
To the full-blown.
Right. And you can't really rush it.
You can't pop it too early.
Otherwise, it gets worse.
Exactly. Same with conflicts. They evolve.
Over time,
Trying to rush through those stages.
you can actually make things worse.
Backfire.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like being patient.
Allowing the process to unfold.
Okay, so speaking of timing,
Oh, yes. Timing is crucial.
Yoons talks about the importance of choosing the right moment to address a conflict.
You can't just barge in.
When someone's like stressed out,
Tired, distracted.
yeah, they're not going to be receptive.
It's like trying to have a serious conversation.
When your partner's in the middle of cooking dinner.
Or catching up on work emails,
Oh, yeah, not a good idea.
right? So Yoons encourages us to be mindful.
Of the other person's state of mind.
Choose a time when they're more open to dialogue. Create that space for a productive conversation.
Exactly.
Okay, now this next part, it really got me thinking.
Okay, what's that?
Yoons, he makes this interesting observation about reality and how it relates to conflict.
Okay, I'm listening.
He says there's a difference between reality as it actually happened.
And the narrative we construct around it.
So, like, we're not always seeing things clearly.
We can distort what happened.
He tells this story about a couple who went to him for mediation after their brand new glass table.
Shattered.
Yeah. Into a million pieces.
It's a mediator's worst nightmare.
I bet. So they were convinced.
That the table was faulty.
Right, but Yoons,
He started to question their narrative.
whether they were being totally objective.
Right, like were they so focused on blaming the table?
That they missed something.
They overlooked other possibilities?
So basically our stories, the ones we tell ourselves,
They can shape our experience of conflict.
even distort reality.
Sometimes those narratives...
They might not be entirely accurate.
We got to be open to questioning our own assumptions.
Yeah. And be willing to see things from different perspectives.
Okay, now this is interesting. Yoons talks about the delicate balance between conducting a mediation
Okay.
and truly serving the parties involved. He uses this musical analogy.
Oh, I love a good analogy. Let's hear it.
He compares the mediator to a conductor.
Ooh, I like that.
It's about orchestrating the conversation.
Bringing those different voices together?
In harmony.
Yeah, but it's more than just conducting. Right.
Right. Serving, it goes beyond just keeping things flowing.
Yeah.
It's about creating a space.
Where everyone feels heard.
Respected.
And empowered to find their own solutions.
It's about facilitating a process of self-discovery.
Yeah, not imposing solutions from the outside.
Exactly.
Okay, so now, remember that orange analogy we talked about earlier?
With the two sisters.
Yeah. Yunes brings it back.
He does, to illustrate
The difference between positions and interests.
Right. So focusing solely on positions like, I want the orange, can lead to a deadlock.
Yeah, nobody wins.
But if you understand their interests, like one sister wants the peel, the other wants the juice.
Then you can find a creative solution.
Exactly.
It's about going beyond those surface level demands.
To uncover those deeper motivations.
Okay, so we talked about this earlier. The importance of giving a voice to those who might struggle to express themselves.
Oh, yes, the silent victim.
Yeah. Yunes emphasizes that,
Not everyone is comfortable speaking up.
especially during a conflict.
Some people are more introverted.
Yeah. And their voices matter just as much
Just as much. And he encourages mediators to be really attentive.
to those nonverbal cues.
Right. Those subtle signs.
The body language.
Exactly. Create a safe space where everyone feels comfortable sharing.
Yeah, even if it's not through words.
Okay, and you remember that whole idea of planned emotional outbursts?
The example with the woman at the bank, I'm still kind of processing that one.
It is a bit mind-blowing, right?
Hmm.
But Yoon suggests that sometimes a deliberate display of emotion can actually help break a stalemate.
So it's like controlled chaos.
In a way, it's about using your emotions strategically.
Okay, so it's not about being emotionally manipulative.
No, it's more about knowing when and how to express your emotions.
To get your point across.
How to make an impact.
Interesting. Okay, and then Yunes, he brings back that road trip analogy.
Yeah, yes, the road trip of life.
He reminds us that life, like a road trip, is full of
Twists and turns,
detours, unexpected stops.
flat tires.
And sometimes we get lost.
We do. But the key is to keep your eyes on the destination.
Not get bogged down in those past grievances.
Or those roadside distractions.
So it's about being adaptable
Flexible.
and remembering that the journey is part of the fun.
Right. Even those frustrating moments.
Okay, now this next part really resonated with me.
Tell me more.
Yunes talks about virtual reality.
Oh, yes. The allure of the virtual world.
And how it can actually distract us from.
Real human connection.
Yeah. It's like we're choosing those perfectly filtered Instagram photos.
Over the messiness of real life.
Yeah, and he connects this to the parable of the fig tree.
Right. That temptation to seek fulfillment in those manufactured experiences.
It's like we're constantly chasing something more.
Something outside ourselves.
And Yunes reminds us
that this fight, the fight to satisfy our hunger with things of this world, is as old as the human race.
it's a timeless struggle.
It is.
And speaking of technology,
Ah, yes. The double-edged sword.
Yunes talks about its impact on communication.
How it can both connect us and isolate us.
Yeah, and he tells this great story.
About his nephews.
Yeah, who live overseas.
And how physical affection, like a hug, a handshake, was so important for their bond.
It's a good reminder that sometimes we need to put down our phones
Yeah, disconnect from the digital world.
and have those real in-person interactions.
Because sometimes emojis just don't cut it.
Okay, now this part, I highlighted it in the book.
Oh, this must be good. Tell me more.
Yunes talks about the role of nostalgia in conflict.
That longing for the good old days.
And he suggests that dwelling on the past can actually prevent us from resolving present conflicts.
It can hold us back.
So, like, reminiscing about how things used to be.
It can be a trap.
Yeah, because we're not focusing on what's happening now.
And we're not focused on creating a better future.
Right. He connects this to Psalm 90.
Which encourages us to focus on the present.
And the future.
Letting go of the past.
Because we can't change it.
But we can change how we approach the present moment.
It's about learning from our past mistakes.
But not letting them define us.
Right. And moving forward with hope and a fresh perspective.
Okay. Now, Yunes addresses something that can be a real obstacle in conflict.
What's that?
Low self-esteem.
Oh, yeah. That can make it hard to stand up for yourself.
It can. And it can make you more vulnerable to conflict.
Yeah, because you don't feel worthy.
Of respect, of being heard.
And he brings back that statement about there being no command in the Bible to love ourselves.
Right. He suggests that focusing too much on self-love can actually be counterproductive.
So what's the alternative?
He shares his own journey of finding peace and self-worth through his relationship with God.
It's like finding that inner strength and validation.
From a source outside yourself.
Okay, now let's talk about a topic that I know a lot of us struggle with.
Okay, what's that?
Discipline. especially in a parenting context.
Ah, yes. Parenting, one of the most rewarding
And challenging.
aspects of life.
Absolutely.
Nah.
So what are Yoon's thoughts on discipline?
Well, he starts with a story. You might remember it.
The chess pawn in the toilet.
That's the one. It perfectly captures those complex emotions tied to childhood discipline.
The guilt, the frustration.
The anger.
Yeah, and then he brings in the biblical perspective.
He references passages from Ephesians and Proverbs
So he's like bridging that gap.
between those ancient teachings and modern parenting practices.
And he emphasizes that discipline, when done right, is an act of love,
It's about setting boundaries
guiding a child toward their full potential.
while also respecting their individuality.
It's finding that balance.
It is.
Okay, so now Yoon's, he offers some really helpful advice for parents facing a particularly difficult challenge,
What's that?
helping their children cope with anger,
And the desire for revenge.
especially when the parent is battling a serious illness.
That's a tough one.
It is. It's like a double whammy of pain.
And he draws on his own experience losing his father to cancer.
And what does he suggest?
He encourages parents to help their children recognize and manage their anger.
Finding those healthy outlets.
Yes, he emphasizes the power of confession,
Correct.
talking to someone they trust,
Yeah, it's about creating that space.
a safe space to process those difficult emotions.
Okay, so now, remember that concept we talked about earlier?
God's simultaneousness.
Yeah, Yoon's brings it back.
He does. To remind us that even in the midst of suffering,
We're not alone.
God is at work.
Behind the scenes.
He tells the story of his own search for a replacement for his father's friendship.
And how he realized that God was the friend he had been looking for all along.
It's a beautiful reminder that we can find connection and comfort in unexpected places.
Absolutely. And this leads us to a very powerful passage from the Bible.
Oh, you're talking about the stoning of Stephen.
Yes, in Acts 7.
Such a brutal story.
It's hard to read.
And Yunes focuses on Stephen's incredible act of forgiveness
Forgiving his killers.
while they were stoning him to death.
It's mind-blowing.
It is. And he presents it as this profound lesson in conflict resolution.
It's a reminder that even in the face of extreme adversity,
We have a choice.
we can choose forgiveness.
Over bitterness, over revenge.
It's a challenging concept,
It is.
but also incredibly inspiring.
Right. To think that even in our darkest moments,
We can choose love.
we can choose grace.
And Yoons brings this to life with a personal story.
About visiting a friend who had lost his wife to cancer,
Yeah, how this
but
family,
found solace in their faith.
even in the midst of such grief,
It's a testament to the human spirit
our capacity for resilience.
and the power of faith to carry us through those dark times.
Absolutely.
Okay, now Yunes reminds us of something crucial in today's world.
What's that?
The importance of rest.
Rest. I mean, that sounds amazing, but
I know, right?
in our culture,
It's almost a foreign concept.
like, you're lazy if you rest.
Right. But Yunes points out that even Jesus,
It's time to rest.
even in the days leading up to his crucifixion,
He's giving us permission to slow down,
to disconnect,
to recharge,
and he shares a personal story.
about being robbed at gunpoint.
Yes, that story. It's both terrifying.
And ultimately inspiring.
It is. He describes that shock.
Vulnerability.
And what's so powerful is his daughter's response
She prayed for the robbers.
for their salvation.
It's incredible.
Mm.
That in that moment of fear,
She shows love.
it gives me chills every time I think about it.
It's a beautiful example of the kind of transformation Yunes invites us to embrace.
It's about finding God's goodness in the darkest moments,
Choosing love over fear.
even when it feels impossible.
This has been such a rich conversation.
I know, right? I feel like my mind is exploding with all these ideas.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but in a good way.
Right.
It's like a mental workout.
And we're not done yet.
There's more.
There are a few more gems to uncover.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with them.
Okay, so remember we were talking about those final gems from Yoon's book?
Yeah, those extra nuggets of wisdom.
Well, towards the end, he shares this fictional short story.
A short story. Interesting.
It's called Other People's Time.
Okay, and how does this fit into the whole conflict resolution theme?
It beautifully illustrates some of his key principles.
Like what?
Empathy,
Okay.
presence, deep listening.
I'm sensing a theme here.
It's about putting aside your own agenda, you know?
Yeah.
Really focusing on the other person.
It's funny you should say that,
Oh, why is that?
because as you were talking about all this, I realized I was doing that.
You were being present.
Yeah. like really trying to absorb everything you were saying.
It's amazing, isn't it, how just shifting your focus can change the whole dynamic?
Totally. It's like putting down your phone.
Turning off the TV.
Yeah, all those distractions.
And just giving someone your undivided attention.
Which is a rare gift these days.
It is.
A very rare gift.
And at the end of this story, Yunes asks this really thought-provoking question.
Oh, what's that?
He asks, why is it so hard for us to understand that what we give in life, including our time, our attention, is more important than what we receive?
It's a powerful question.
It is.
It makes you think about what you're really prioritizing in your life.
What are you giving?
Yeah, are we so focused on getting what we want?
Achieving our goals?
Building our own success?
That we forget about giving back?
Yeah, offering our time, our attention, our love to others.
It's a good question to ask ourselves, don't you think?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Yunes's book,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what's your biggest takeaway?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's that conflict resolution is more than just techniques.
It's a way of life.
Exactly. It's about integrating these principles into our daily lives.
It's about those small choices we make every day.
To listen instead of interrupt.
To seek understanding instead of judging. To offer grace instead of criticism.
And over time, those choices, they can transform not just our relationships,
but our whole outlook on life.
So it's not about becoming some conflict resolution expert overnight.
It's about those small, consistent changes.
Yeah, those baby steps.
That can lead to big transformations.
Well said. So I think it's time to bring this deep dive to a close.
I know. I'm sad to see it end. But this book has given me so much to think about.
It's a book you can keep coming back to.
Yeah, there's so much wisdom packed into those pages.
And for all of you listening out there,
yeah, we hope you've enjoyed this journey with us.
We encourage you to check out Yunes' book.
It's called Conflict Resolution, A Life in Letters.
And, even if you don't agree with everything he says,
yeah,
I think there's something in this book for everyone. And remember, conflict doesn't have to be a destructive force.
It could be an opportunity for growth.
Understanding.
Deeper connection.
So the next time you find yourself in a disagreement,
big or small,
take a deep breath.
Remember what we've talked about today.
And try approaching it with a little more curiosity.
A little more compassion.
And a little more courage.
You might just be surprised at what happens.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.